My name is Elena Marchetti, and at 34, I finally learned what my own family thought I was worth. 2 weeks after we buried my grandmother, I was standing in my kitchen sorting sympathy cards when the mail carrier handed me a certified envelope. The return address was a law firm in downtown Bakersfield. Inside, 6 pages of dense legal language spelled out that my Aunt Celeste was demanding $500,000 in retroactive caregiving wages for the 6 years she supposedly took care of Grandma Viola full-time. The letter named me personally, not the estate. Me. If I refused to pay, she'd file suit against my entire inheritance share. I set the letter down on the counter and looked at the date stamp. March 21st, 2024, 74 days after my grandmother died in that hospital bed with me holding her hand. I called my father that night. He sighed and said, "Elena, your aunt gave up her life to move in with Mama. Just sign whatever they send you and let it go." But here's what none of them knew. In the hall closet of my apartment, under a stack of old nursing textbooks, sat a locked steel file box. Inside, 18 months of recorded phone calls, 412 days of time-stamped photographs, bank statements showing ATM withdrawals from casinos and cruise ships, and a spreadsheet tracking every single day. My aunt was anywhere but that house on Lemon Street. The courtroom door opened, and Celeste adjusted her pearl necklace like she'd already won. Welcome to the channel. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Please hit subscribe and like this video to find out how that certified envelope from Celeste's lawyer sat on my kitchen table for 3 days before I opened it. My father shifted in the gallery, a creak of leather, and guilt 6 rows back. I didn't turn around. I'd spent 34 years turning around for Leo Marchetti, waiting for him to choose me. He never did. That was a fact I'd finally stopped arguing with. The way you stop arguing with a wall and just walk around it. The mediator's name was Patricia Okonkwo, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses on a gold chain and a manner that suggested she'd seen every flavor of family rot there was. She didn't smile when we sat down. She didn't offer coffee. She opened a leather portfolio, glanced at the claim form Celeste had filed in March and said, "Ms. Marchetti, you're seeking $497,600 in retroactive caregiver compensation. Is that correct?" $500,000 even, Celeste said. "I'm rounding down, really, when you consider what I gave up." I watched Patricia's pen hover. Rounding down from what number? Celeste waved a hand. She was wearing a mauve blouse with a bow at the neck, the kind of blouse that photographs well in church directories. I didn't keep a time card if that's what you're implying. I was too busy changing sheets and driving to dialysis. Grandma Viola never had dialysis. Her kidneys were fine until the day she died, a fact documented in 17 pages of medical records sitting in the steel box at my feet. I said nothing. I was getting very good at saying nothing. Patricia turned a page. The claim states you provided 24-hour care for 6 years from March 2018 until Mrs. Viola Marchetti's passing in January of this year. Is that accurate? It is? With no breaks, no vacations, no periods where someone else was responsible for her care? Celeste's lawyer, a jowly man named Brickman, who smelled faintly of menthol, cut in. My client made personal sacrifices that... "I'm asking your client," Patricia said, not unkindly. "Ms. Marchetti?" Celeste touched the bow at her neck. "I had occasional respite periods. Every caregiver needs a mental health day now and then." "A mental health day," Patricia repeated and wrote something down. I'd learned that phrase in nursing school, respite care, and I'd learned what it actually meant when I was 28 and watching my aunt pack a suitcase for a 10-day carnival cruise, while my grandmother's Meals on Wheels sat untouched on the porch because no one was there to bring it inside. That was September 2018. Celeste had been living at 841 Lemon Street for exactly 6 months. She'd already changed the locks and told the hospice volunteer we no longer needed services. "We've got it covered," she'd said, standing in the doorway with a Diet Coke in her hand while Grandma Viola called my phone from her bedroom, whispering, "Elena, I haven't had my pills in 2 days." I drove over that night. I let myself in through the back window, the one in the laundry room that never latched right, and found my grandmother sitting in her recliner in a soiled housecoat, the television playing a game show she couldn't hear. Celeste's car was gone. Her bedroom door was locked. On the kitchen counter, I found a Bank of America statement addressed to Viola Marchetti, and I opened it, my first act of what Celeste would later call snooping and I would call evidence gathering. And I saw an ATM withdrawal from the Mirage in Las Vegas dated 2 days prior. I took a photo of that statement with my phone. I didn't know why yet. I just knew I needed to. Patricia was asking about the house now. And during these 6 years, you lived at the property full time? 841 Lemon Street was your primary residence. It was. No other addresses? Celeste's mouth tightened. I have a timeshare in Palm Springs. I used it occasionally. I opened the steel box. The lid made a small metallic sound, and Celeste flinched. I have documentation, I said, showing that my aunt spent at least 412 days at locations that were not 841 Lemon Street between 2018 and 2024. That's my conservative count. The actual number is likely higher. I pulled out the first folder, a green Pendaflex with the year 2019 printed on the tab in my handwriting. I have hotel receipts, credit card statements, photographs with time and location stamps. I have a spreadsheet correlating each absence with corresponding gaps in my grandmother's care, days when no one was in the house to administer medication, prepare meals, or respond to emergencies. Celeste's voice went up half an octave. You were spying on me? For 6 years you were spying? No, I said. I was visiting my grandmother. Every single one of those 412 days, I was at that house because you weren't. The room went very still. Brickman leaned over and whispered something in Celeste's ear. She shook her head once, hard. Patricia Okonkwo looked at me over her glasses. Where did you obtain these records? Some are mine, my phone, my calendar, my photographs. Some are from Viola's accounts, which I had legal access to as co-executor of her estate. Some are public. I pulled out a color printout, a Carnival Cruise Line promotional photo that Celeste had been tagged in on Facebook, January 2021. She was holding a piña colada. The caption read, Girls Trip. So blessed. This was during a COVID surge. My grandmother had pneumonia. I was sleeping on her floor because the hospital was full and they sent her home with oxygen. My aunt was on a boat in the Bahamas. Celeste's face went the color of putty, not guilty putty. Caught putty. There's a difference. And I'd learned to read it. I was her granddaughter, I said, not her paid caregiver. I never asked for a dime. I never filed a claim. I just showed up. I pulled out the phone records next, a thick sheaf of Verizon statements with numbers highlighted in yellow. And when I couldn't show up, I called twice a day, most days. You can see the duration of each call. Some of them are 40 minutes, some are an hour. I have voice recordings. Grandma Viola consented to every one of them, where she tells me she hasn't eaten, or she can't find her medication, or she doesn't know where Celeste is. My father's voice came from the back of the room, a low rumble I'd been hearing my whole life. Elena, that's enough. I didn't turn around. Mr. Marchetti, Patricia said, you're here as an observer. Please don't speak unless I address you. Leo went quiet. I could feel the weight of his disapproval like a hand on the back of my neck, but I'd been carrying that weight since I was 12 years old, and he'd told me to apologize to Celeste for making a scene at Christmas. She'd given me a sweater with the tags ripped off and a stain on the sleeve, and when I'd pointed it out politely, I thought, she'd cried in the bathroom for an hour. She's sensitive, my father said. You're too hard on people, Elena. I wasn't too hard on people. I was too truthful, which in the Marchetti family was the same thing as cruelty. Patricia set down her pen. Ms. Celeste Marchetti, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence Ms. Elena Marchetti submitted to this office. I'd like to ask you directly, how many days in 2022 did you personally provide care for your mother? All of them, Celeste said. Your niece has documented 83 days that year where you were demonstrably elsewhere. I don't know where she gets her numbers. From your Instagram, I said. The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Celeste's lawyer closed his eyes. Patricia didn't flinch. I'm going to recommend we take a brief recess. When we return, I'd like to discuss what a realistic settlement might look like, because at the moment, Miss Marchetti, she looked at Celeste, not unkindly, just finally. Your claim is not holding up well. Celeste stood up too fast. Her chair scraped the floor. This is ridiculous. I gave up 6 years of my life. I put my career on hold. What career? I asked. The room went cold. Patricia held up a hand, but I wasn't being cruel. I was asking an honest question. Celeste hadn't held a job since 2006. She'd lived off a settlement from a slip and fall at a Ralph's grocery store. And then she'd lived off my grandmother. The house, the bank accounts, the credit cards in Viola Marchetti's name that Celeste used for gas and groceries and apparently pina coladas in international waters. This wasn't caregiving. This was squatting with extra steps. In the hallway, my father caught my arm. His grip was familiar. You're humiliating her. She tried to steal $500,000 from her dead mother's estate. She's your aunt. She's a liar, I said, and my voice didn't shake. She's been lying for 6 years. You knew she was lying. You told me to let it go. Family doesn't do this to family. Family doesn't bill family for care that never happened. I pulled my arm free. I'm not doing anything to her. I'm just not covering for her anymore. There's a difference. I walked back into the mediation room alone. Celeste was at the window, her back to the door, her shoulders stiff. Brickman was on his phone, murmuring. Patricia Okonkwo was looking at a photograph I'd submitted, one of the last ones I'd taken of my grandmother, November 2023. She was sitting in her recliner at 841 Lemon Street, a blanket across her lap. Her hair, Patricia folded her hands on the conference table. A gold bracelet slid down her wrist. She was 60, maybe, silver hair cut sharp at the jaw, and she didn't smile when she worked. The claim is structured as a creditor's claim against the estate of Viola Marchetti, she said. Your aunt is asserting she provided 6 years of full-time custodial care. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from March 2018 until your grandmother's death in January 2024. She's calculated the value at $500,000 based on a rate of $23 an hour for what she calls basic companion care, discounted from market rate as a family courtesy. I didn't react. I'd learned by then not to react in front of people who were measuring your reactions. That's 2,190 days, I said. Patricia glanced at her notes. Yes, minus the 417 days I can prove she wasn't there. Patricia looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached for the folder again and opened it to the first photograph. The Christmas card Celeste had sent from a cruise ship in 2019. A glossy photo of her on a deck chair holding a blue drink with an umbrella. Merry Christmas from the Mexican Riviera in gold foil across the bottom. The postmark was December 14th, 2019. I had been at the house on Lemon Street that same day, bringing Grandma a poinsettia and a tin of butter cookies from Costco. This is good, Patricia said. This is very good, but I need you to understand something. The court doesn't automatically assume a family member's claim is fraudulent. Your aunt has the right to make this claim, and unless we can demonstrate clearly with documentation that the services were not rendered, the burden falls on the estate to pay it or to negotiate a settlement. How much time do I have? The hearing is set for November. I have mediation in September. We'll file our response within 30 days. She closed the folder. I'll need everything you have, originals or certified copies, bank statements of the photographs with metadata intact, any written communication between you and your aunt, between her and your grandmother, between her and your father. Everything. I thought about the steel file box under my bed. I'd bought it at an Office Depot in 2020 for $43. It weighed 11 pounds empty. Full, it weighed close to 30. You'll have it by Friday, I said. Patricia walked me to the elevator. Her hand on my elbow was brief and professional, but her voice dropped half a register. Your aunt is going to be very unhappy when she sees what you have. I know, I said. She may try to contact you directly. Don't engage. Refer everything to me. I'm a nurse, I said. I know how to keep a chart. The elevator doors closed. I watched my reflection in the polished steel and thought about the house on Lemon Street. My grandmother Viola bought that house in 1962 with my grandfather, a man I never met because he died of a heart attack in 1971 at the age of 42. Leaving her with 2 teenagers and a mortgage she couldn't afford on a secretary's salary. She kept it anyway. She worked double shifts at the county assessor's office, typed medical transcriptions at night on an IBM Selectric she kept on the kitchen table, and paid that house off in 18 years instead of 30. The house was a 1940s Spanish bungalow with a red tile roof and a lemon tree in the backyard that produced fruit so sour you couldn't eat it raw. But Grandma made lemon bars every Christmas that tasted like sunlight. The floors were oak with 60 years of wax on them, and the hallway to the bedrooms had a dip in the middle where the foundation had settled in the 1980s. And if you walked it barefoot, you learned to step around the dip without thinking. I learned to walk in that house. I learned to read on the floral couch in the living room, my grandmother's finger moving under the words in a little golden book. I learned to cook, standing on a step stool next to her stove, cracking eggs into a blue ceramic bowl with a chip on the rim that she never replaced because the chip was from the day my mother dropped it while making my first birthday cake. My mother, Camila, was Viola's daughter-in-law, but Viola loved her like a daughter. When my mother got sick in 2004, when I was 14, Viola moved into our house for 7 months. She slept on a pull-out sofa in my room and woke at 5 every morning to make my mother tea with honey and ginger while my father went to work and pretended nothing was happening. After the funeral, Viola stayed another 6 weeks. She packed my mother's clothes into cardboard boxes labeled Camilla, Keep, and Camilla, Donate, in her neat, slanted handwriting, and she didn't let my father touch any of it because he would have thrown it all away just to stop seeing it. My father, Leo, is not a bad man. He's a man who doesn't know how to be uncomfortable, and so he arranges his life to avoid discomfort at any cost. After my mother died, he remarried within 2 years to a woman named Sheila, who didn't like reminders of the first wife, and my grandmother's presence in our lives became a thing he tolerated rather than welcomed. By the time I graduated from nursing school at 24, I was the only one driving to Bakersfield every Sunday. Every Sunday, 2 hours down the 5 from Sacramento, 2 hours back. I'd arrive at 10 in the morning with a bag of groceries and the Sunday paper. Grandma would have coffee made, the percolator still sputtering on the counter because she refused to buy a drip machine. We'd do the crossword together. She'd tell me about her week, the neighbor's new dog, the price of oranges at the market. I'd check her blood pressure, refill her pill organizer, look at her feet for swelling. Then I'd make lunch, soup usually, something soft because her teeth bothered her, and we'd eat at the kitchen table with the blue bowl on the windowsill catching the light. At 2 o'clock, I'd drive home, 240 miles round trip. I did the math once. Over 6 years, that's something like 75,000 miles. I never asked for a dime. Celeste visited 3 times that I know of. Once in 2016 for Thanksgiving, when she stayed 2 nights and spent most of the time on her phone. Once in March 2018 when she moved in, I'll get to that, and once in 2021 for 2 hours on a Tuesday afternoon, which I know because my grandmother called me afterward and said, "Your aunt came by. She looks tired." That was the entirety of the report. But the Christmas cards came every year. Celeste on a beach in Cabo, Celeste at a winery in Napa, Celeste and a man I didn't recognize standing in front of the Bellagio fountains, wishing you a season of joy, the card said in fonts that someone at Shutterfly had picked out. My grandmother kept every single one of them in a shoebox in her closet, and when I found them after she died, I sat on her bedroom floor and read each one twice. Wishing you a season of joy. Love, Celeste and Gary. 2019. Thinking of you this Christmas. Celeste, 2020. Happy holidays from sunny Florida. Celeste and Gary, 2021. The 2020 card arrived 3 weeks after I'd spent Christmas Day alone with Grandma because of the lockdowns. I'd worn a mask and sat 6 feet away, and we'd eaten ham off paper plates in separate rooms, shouting conversation through the doorway. She'd cried when I left. I cried in the car. Celeste sent a card. I didn't hate my aunt. That's the thing I want to be clear about. I didn't start from a place of anger. I started from a place of confusion and then suspicion, and then a kind of cold, patient attention that I didn't know I had in me until I needed it. I read later that there's a word for what happens when someone rewrites history so completely that you start to doubt your own memory. Gaslighting. But at the time, I just thought, something is wrong here, and I need to pay attention. So I paid attention. I started keeping the photographs in January 2020 after I stopped by on a Thursday, not my usual Sunday, and found Grandma alone, the house cold, a frozen dinner still in its box on the counter because she couldn't work the microwave. Celeste's car was gone. Her bedroom door was open, the bed made, a half-empty water bottle on the nightstand. I asked Grandma where Celeste was. Palm Springs, I think, Grandma said. She has a friend there. That was the first time I wrote it down. I pulled out my phone and opened a note and typed, January 23rd, 2020, 2:15 p.m., Celeste not home. Grandma alone, cold, hungry, P.S. for Palm Springs. I used shorthand because I was a nurse, and nurses use shorthand. After that, I used shorthand for a lot of things. Patricia's office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Sacramento. From the parking garage, I could see the Tower Bridge and a slice of the river, gray-green in the February light. I sat in my car for 10 minutes with the engine off and the windows up, and I thought about the file box under my bed, and I thought about my father's voice on the phone the week before. Elena, just let it go. She's family. Grandma wouldn't want this. Grandma wouldn't want Celeste taking $500,000 from her estate, I said. You don't know that. I know Grandma. She was my mother, he said, and his voice cracked, and I felt the old guilt rise up like water in a drain. But I didn't apologize. No, I said. She was the woman who raised me, and I'm not letting this go. He hung up. I sat in my parents separated when I was 9, and the math of my childhood rearranged itself into something I couldn't solve. My mother moved to Phoenix with a man who sold restaurant equipment, and my father traveled for the pipeline, and somewhere in all that subtraction, I landed at 841 Lemon Street with a key on a piece of red yarn around my neck. Grandma Viola didn't make a speech about it. She just cleared the bottom drawer of the dresser in the guest room and said, "Your socks go here." That was the whole ceremony. I was hers after that. She taught me to make gnocchi on a flour-dusted counter, her knuckles swollen, but her fingers still quick. She walked me to the bus stop every morning until I was 14 and begged her to stop. And then she watched from the kitchen window instead, which I pretended not to notice. She came to my nursing school pinning ceremony in 2010, sat in the 3rd row in a navy dress she'd bought at Mervyn's in 1994, and cried without making a sound. When I bought my condo in 2016, 2 bedrooms, 890 square feet on the east side of town, I asked if she wanted to come live with me. She looked around her kitchen, at the yellow wallpaper she'd hung with my grandfather in 1972, and said, "I've got too much dust here to move, Elena. Dust gets heavy." I didn't push. She was 80 then, still driving to church, still making her own dentist appointments. I stopped by 3 times a week. I took her to her colonoscopy, her mammograms, her eye exams. I paid her property taxes one year when her fixed annuity came up short. $4,200 I never told anyone about because it wasn't a loan, it was just what you did. And then in March of 2018, the doorbell rang. I was at work when it happened. 12-hour shift at Mercy downtown, 2 hip replacements, and a septic workup, so I didn't hear about it until that evening when I pulled into her driveway and saw a silver Lexus SUV. I didn't recognize parked behind her Buick. The Lexus had a cracked passenger side mirror, duct tape holding it together, and a Palm Springs Life sticker on the back window. The trunk was open, and I could see 2 large suitcases, a hanging bag, and a cardboard box with a lamp sticking out of it. Inside, Aunt Celeste was sitting at the kitchen table drinking Grandma's coffee out of Grandma's mug, the one with the chip in the handle that I'd offered to replace 6 times. "Elena," she stood up and opened her arms. "Look at you, all grown up and still so serious." Celeste was 51 then, my father's younger sister, and I'd seen her maybe 4 times in the previous decade. She'd been living in a condo in Rancho Mirage, working, as far as I could tell, as something adjacent to real estate, the kind of job that always sounded impressive when she described it, and impossible to verify when you asked questions. She had my grandmother's dark hair, but none of her stillness. Celeste moved, like a person who was always just about to leave. "I'm staying for a while," she said, sitting back down. "Just until I get back on my feet. The market tanked. My condo went upside down. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I'd bought my condo with a 20% down payment I'd saved over 6 years because Grandma taught me that debt was a snake you had to keep in a cage. "And I thought," Celeste continued, stirring her coffee, "I could help out around here. Mama's getting older. She shouldn't be alone." Grandma was at the sink, rinsing lettuce with her back to us. Her shoulders were tight in a way I recognized. She didn't turn around. "That's very generous of you," I said, and my voice sounded foreign to my own ears, flat and careful. Celeste waved her hand. "It's not generous. It's family. You've been caring too much, Elena. Leo told me. All the appointments, the driving, the worrying. You've got your own life. I'm here now." Leo? My father, who called Grandma twice a month and visited at Christmas if the weather was good. Leo, who'd told me 3 months earlier that I should stop hovering and let Grandma have some independence. I could picture the phone call. Celeste, broke and desperate, spinning the story to her big brother, and Leo, relieved to have someone else step in so he could stop feeling guilty about not stepping up himself. "What are you thinking?" I asked Grandma, walking to the sink and touching her elbow. She turned off the water and dried her hands on the dish towel, folded it neatly, laid it on the counter. My grandmother didn't sigh. She just said, "It's fine, Elena's. Celeste can have the guest room." The guest room, my room, the bottom drawer of the dresser where my socks used to go. I stayed for dinner. Celeste ordered pizza on her phone and talked about her plans. She was going to organize Grandma's paperwork, get her on a better Medicare plan, maybe do some light remodeling. "This kitchen needs an update, Mama. We'll make it nice." Grandma ate 1 slice of pepperoni and said she was tired and went to bed at 7:30. I let myself out and sat in my car for 20 minutes with the engine off. The March air was cool, that desert cool that Bakersfield gets before the heat comes in and stays. I could see Celeste through the kitchen window, opening cabinets, pulling things out, inventorying. I told myself I was being paranoid. She was family. She'd lost her condo. She was trying to help. 3 weeks later, I came by on a Tuesday morning before my shift and found a hospital bed in the living room. Grandma was in her recliner, watching The Price is Right on low volume. The hospital bed was made up with white sheets, the rails up, a tray table positioned beside it with a box of Kleenex and a plastic cup with a straw. "What is this?" I asked. Grandma didn't look at the bed. "Celeste says it'll be easier for my back." "Your back is fine." "My back is 82 years old, Elena. It's not fine." Celeste came in from the hallway holding a clipboard. She was wearing scrubs, teal scrubs with little cartoon cats on them, and her hair was pulled back in a clip. "Good morning," she said, too cheerfully. "I'm just doing Mama's morning assessment." "Your morning what?" She showed me the clipboard. There was a form on it, printed from the internet, daily caregiver log, with spaces for blood pressure, meals, medications, activities, and a signature line at the bottom. "I'm keeping records," she said, "in case we need to show the state that Mama's getting proper care, for insurance purposes." I looked at Grandma. Her eyes were fixed on the television, Drew Carey's face flickering in the reflection of her glasses. "Can I talk to you outside?" I said to Celeste. We stood on the front porch, the concrete warm already, the lemon tree in the front yard, dropping fruit nobody was picking up. "Grandma doesn't need a hospital bed," I said. "She doesn't need a caregiver log. She needs someone to drive her to church and make sure she takes her blood thinner." Celeste's face changed. The cheerfulness slid off, and underneath it was something harder, something I'd never seen before. "You don't know what she needs, Elena. You're not here all day. I am. I'm here 3 times a week. And I'm here every day, every night. I'm the one who gets up when she can't sleep. I'm the one who makes sure she eats." Her voice was rising, and I noticed a neighbor across the street pause with her garbage can, watching. "Lower your voice," I said. "Don't tell me what to do in my mother's house." "Your mother. You haven't visited her in 4 years, Celeste." 4 years! I have been taking her to every appointment, every holiday, and now I'm making up for lost time." She crossed her arms. "You should be grateful. You should be thanking me for taking this off your plate." I didn't thank her. I went back inside, kissed Grandma on the forehead, and left for my shift. All day, while I hung IV bags and charted vitals, I thought about that clipboard, that hospital bed, the way Celeste had said, for insurance purposes. That night, I went to Office Depot and bought a fireproof steel file box. It was $47.99, black, with a combination lock. I set the combination to Grandma's birthday, 08-1936, and put it in the back of my hall closet. I didn't know what I was going to put in it yet. I just knew I needed a place to keep things safe. A week later, I stopped by the house on my day off and found Celeste's Lexus gone. Grandma was alone in the living room, still in her nightgown at 11 in the morning, the hospital bed unmade and the tray table holding a bowl of cereal that had gone soggy. "Where's Celeste?" Grandma shrugged. She had an appointment. What kind of appointment? She didn't say. I made her eggs. I helped her shower. I sat with her while she watched her shows, and Celeste didn't come back until after dinner, smelling of cigarettes and perfume, carrying a shopping bag from the outlet mall. "Everything okay?" she asked, seeing me on the couch. I didn't answer. I just looked at her, and she looked at me, and something passed between us that didn't have a word yet but would, eventually. I went home and opened the file box. It was still empty. I took a breath, closed it, and locked it. Not yet, I thought, but soon. I didn't have a plan. That's what I want to be clear about. People hear ledger, and they picture someone methodical, someone with a strategy mapped out on graph paper. I wasn't that person. I was just tired and a little afraid and starting to notice that my memory wasn't enough anymore. It began with a sticky note. February 14th, 2020, Valentine's Day. I remember because I'd worked a double shift at Mercy and came home to find a text from Aunt Celeste. "Your grandmother needs new pressure stockings, the ones the doctor recommended. I paid out of pocket, $87.50. Can you reimburse?" I stared at the text for a long time. $87.50 wasn't going to break me. I was making $42 an hour as an RN, plus differentials, and my rent was manageable. But something about the number bothered me. I'd bought Grandma the exact same pressure stockings in November. 3 pairs, $26 each, from the medical supply on Truxton. I'd written the date on the receipt and tucked it in the nightstand drawer in case the warranty card needed it. So I drove over the next morning. Celeste wasn't there. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter saying she was at a caregiver support group until noon. Grandma was in her recliner watching an old movie, the Afghan I'd crocheted her my sophomore year of college, pulled up to her chin. I made us both tea, and then, while she was distracted by Cary Grant, I opened the nightstand drawer. The receipt was still there. 3 pairs, November 12th, 2019. And the stockings in Grandma's bathroom were the same ones. I could tell by the small snag on the left heel where her bunion rubbed. I took a photo of the receipt with my phone. I took a photo of the stockings. I didn't know why exactly. It felt like picking up a rock and putting it in my pocket, because someday you might need a rock and you'll be glad you have one. That was the first entry. No ledger yet. Just a manila folder I labeled Viola Receipts and slipped into the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet at home. The sticky note with Celeste's Venmo request went in there, too. I didn't confront her about the stockings. I just sent the $87.50 and wrote in the memo line, "Reimbursement for compression stockings, February 14th, 2020. Digital paper trail, the paralegal part of my brain whispered. Good enough. March brought the first cruise. I found out by accident. I'd stopped by the house on a Tuesday afternoon, my day off, and Grandma mentioned that Celeste had been gone since Sunday. "She said she needed a break," Grandma said, not accusatory, just factual. "Her friend Denise has a timeshare." "Where?" I asked. "Somewhere with a beach. I forget. I called Celeste. It went to voicemail. I texted, 'Hey, just checking in.' Grandma says you're away. Is someone staying with her?" The reply came 3 hours later. I arranged for the neighbor, Mrs. Okonkwo, to check in twice a day. "It's only 4 days. Caregivers need respite, Elena. You wouldn't understand." Mrs. Okonkwo was 74 years old and walked with a cane. I went next door and knocked. Mrs. Okonkwo was gracious but confused. "Celeste asked me to bring Viola her mail and make sure she eats lunch. I'm not staying, dear. I can't do stairs." I thanked her and went back to Grandma's. I made a pot of soup, enough for 4 days, and labeled the containers with the date and reheating instructions. I called my supervisor and swapped shift so I could come every evening until Celeste returned. And I started a Google Calendar, just a private one, nothing shared. I called it Grandma's Care, and I began logging March 17th, 2020. Celeste gone. Mrs. Okonkwo checking in, not overnighting. Elena covering evenings. I attached a photo of the soup containers, the date stamp visible on the container lids. When Celeste got back on Friday, tan, and carrying a straw bag with Cabo San Lucas embroidered on the side, I didn't say anything about the cruise. I just said, "Welcome back. Grandma missed you." She looked at me the way someone looks at a speed bump. Mild irritation, then dismissal. Of course she did. By May, I had a file. Not a thick one, but it was growing. A copy of Grandma's will, which she'd shown me herself in 2019 before the dementia started stealing words. A printed bank statement from the joint account Celeste had talked Grandma into opening for household expenses. Grandma's Social Security deposited there $2,143 a month, and the withdrawals didn't add up to groceries and utilities. They added up to Macy's and restaurant charges in Palm Springs and a $400 payment to something called Desert Princess Wellness Spa. I didn't know about the boyfriend yet. That came later. What I knew was this. Something was wrong. And if I said it out loud, no one would believe me. Celeste was the martyr, the devoted daughter who'd given up her freedom to care for her aging mother. That was the story at every family dinner, every holiday, every phone call with my father. Your aunt is a saint. We're so lucky. I don't know what Mom would do without her, so I didn't try to contradict the story. I just kept collecting facts. July 4th, 2020, Independence Day. Celeste threw a barbecue at the house, invited the neighbors, posted photos on Facebook with captions like, "Blessed to care for my beautiful mother every day." In the photos, Grandma looked exhausted, propped in a lawn chair in a too-hot sun hat. A paper plate balanced on her lap. I counted 14 people in the photos and not a single one interacting with Grandma. I took screenshots. I saved them to the file. That night, after the guests left and I was washing dishes while Celeste scrolled through her phone on the couch, I said, "Aunt Celeste, do you keep a log of Grandma's medications? Like a chart?" She didn't look up. "Why would I need a chart? I know what she takes." "It's just good practice," I said. My voice was even, the same voice I use with difficult patients. "If there's ever an emergency, the paramedics will need a list." "You're so clinical, Elena. Not everything has to be a hospital." I dried my hands on a dish towel. "I'm just saying, it would help me too when I'm here, so I don't give her something she's already had." That got her attention. "What do you mean when you're here? You're not here that often." "I'm here every Thursday and every other weekend, plus whenever you travel." A pause. The air in the kitchen went still. "I don't travel. I'm a full-time caregiver." I said. That was all. Just, I picked up my purse, kissed Grandma on the forehead, and left. In the car, I sat in the driveway for a full minute with my hands on the wheel. I was shaking. Not with anger, with something sharper, something that felt like clarity. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app and typed lie number 1. I don't travel. Evidence. Cabo, March 2020. Also, Palm Springs charges on joint account. Need dates? August. The file box arrived. I ordered it from an office supply website. Fireproof, waterproof, combination lock, weighs 14 pounds empty. It sat on my closet floor like a small black monument to my growing suspicion. I labeled file folders with a Sharpie: financial, medical, timeline, photos, correspondence. My father came to visit in September. He stayed at my apartment, not at the house, which I thought was strange but didn't question. Over breakfast on the second morning, he said, "Your aunt tells me you've been asking a lot of questions." "I'm a nurse," I said. "Asking questions is my job." "It's coming across as accusatory." "I haven't accused anyone of anything." He stirred his coffee for a long time. My father is not a man who stirs coffee. He's a man who drinks it black and fast and moves on to the next thing. This stirring meant something. "Elena, your grandmother is old. She's not going to be around forever. And when she goes, I don't want this family torn apart over money." "Me neither," I said. "That's why I'm paying attention." He looked at me then, really looked, and I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Not agreement, not even understanding. Something more like recognition. He knew his sister. He'd grown up with her. He knew what she was capable of. But he also knew that acknowledging it meant doing something about it. And my father is not a doing something man. He's a let it go man. He'd been letting things go his whole life. "I'm just saying," he said finally. Be careful. I didn't answer. I finished my eggs, rinsed my plate, and went to work. That night, I added a new folder to the file box. I labeled it Dad Conversations. Inside, I put a dated note, September 14th, 2020. Dad warned me to back off. Acknowledged, indirectly, that Celeste has a pattern. Said, be careful. Asked no questions about Grandma's actual care. By December 2020, the calendar on my wall was speckled with red X's. Days Celeste was not at the house. Days. I started the phone calls in January of 2020, right after New Year's, when the holiday fog cleared and I could see the shape of things more plainly. The idea came to me at 3 a.m, lying awake in my apartment in Fresno, staring at the ceiling and running numbers. Celeste had been living at 841 Lemon Street for almost 2 years by then. She'd moved in March of 2018, 3 months after Grandpa died, and the story she told everyone was that she'd given up her apartment in Los Angeles, put her life on hold to care for her aging mother. Noble, selfless, the kind of thing people post on Facebook with crying emojis, and the word blessed. But I'd been out to the house 6 times in those 2 years, unannounced, and 4 of those times Celeste wasn't there. Grandma was, sitting in her recliner with the TV on, a cold cup of tea on the side table, and no idea where her daughter had gone. She had errands, Grandma would say, vague and a little confused, and I'd let it go because I didn't want to upset her. But at 3 a.m. in January 2020, I wasn't letting anything go. I was 30 years old, working as an RN at Community Regional Medical Center in Fresno, and I'd spent the last 18 months taking night classes and paralegal studies through Fresno City College. I told people it was a backup plan, something to fall back on if nursing burned me out, but the truth was simpler and sharper. I wanted to understand how evidence worked, what counted, what didn't, how you built something that would stand up in front of a judge. I didn't know yet that I'd need it, but I felt it, the way nurses feel a patient starting to crash before the monitors register anything. Something was wrong in that house, and I was going to document it. The paralegal instructor, a woman named Diane Okonkwo, who'd spent 20 years in estate litigation, told us once that the most powerful evidence is the kind the other side doesn't know you're collecting. Don't break any laws, she said, tapping the whiteboard with her marker. But California is a 2-party consent state for confidential communications. If you're in a conversation where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy, or if you announce the recording, or if the other party keeps talking after you tell them, that's admissible. Know your rights, and keep your mouth shut about what you know. I wrote that down in my notebook. I still have the page. So on January 9th, 2020, a Thursday, I called Celeste from my kitchen while my coffee was brewing. I put my phone on speaker, opened the voice memo app, and hit record. The little red icon started pulsing. She picked up on the 4th ring. Elena, it's early. I know, sorry, I wanted to catch you before my shift. My voice was calm, friendly. I'd practiced. Grandma's blood pressure meds, the lisinopril. I was going through her chart and realized her refill date was last week. Did you pick it up? A pause. Just a half second too long. Then, of course I picked it up. I'm on top of it. In the background, I heard something, a rhythmic electronic chime, muffled but distinct. Then a clatter, like coins falling into a metal tray. I knew that sound. I'd spent a weekend in Vegas 2 years earlier for a friend's bachelorette party, and the slot machines at the Flamingo made that exact same chime and clatter sequence when they paid out. Great, I said. What's the dosage on the new bottle? I want to update her file. Another pause. Elena, I don't have the bottle in front of me. I stepped out for a minute. Oh, where are you? Light, curious, no edge. Just running errands. Look, I'll check when I get home and text you, okay? I have to go. She hung up before I could answer. I saved the recording. Named it. Celeste _01 _09 _2020.m4a. Dropped it into a folder on my laptop called Viola. The folder had subfolders: financial, medical, photos, recordings. That was the first one. There were 37 more over the next 4 years. Every week, sometimes twice a week, I called. I I never called on the same day or at the same time. I wanted her off balance, never quite sure when I'd reach out. I always had a reason. Grandma's metformin, Grandma's warfarin. Did the home health aide come on Tuesday or Wednesday? Was Grandma eating enough protein? Had she had a bowel movement in the last 3 days? That one always made Celeste uncomfortable, which I admit I enjoyed. And every time, I listened past her words to the world behind her. February 14th, 2020. Background noise was a low mechanical hum and the occasional splash of water, a filter system. Later, when I cross-referenced her credit card statements, ones I didn't have legal access to yet but would obtain during discovery in 2024, I found a charge for the Azure Palm Hot Springs in Desert Hot Springs that same day, April 3rd, 2020. She answered on the 5th ring, breathless, and the background was pure chaos, overlapping announcements, the rumble of suitcase wheels, a child crying. I asked about Grandma's thyroid medication. She said she was at the grocery store. But I'd been to the grocery store on Lemon Street 100 times, and the Save Mart on California Avenue doesn't have PA announcements. August 17th, 2020. The background was so quiet, I thought she might actually be home. Then I heard a door open, and a man's voice said, "You want another drink, babe?" And she muffled the phone and hissed something I couldn't catch. The call ended 30 seconds later. I logged every single one. Date, time, duration, what we discussed, what I heard, what she claimed. I cross-referenced with the calendar I was building, a separate document where I tracked the days I knew for certain she was at the house and the days I knew she wasn't. By the end of 2020, I had evidence of 87 days she was verifiably elsewhere. By the end of 2021, it was 143. By the time Grandma died in January 2024, I had cataloged over 400 days, 400 separate 24-hour periods, where Celeste was not providing the care she would later claim in court was round the clock, continuous, and uncompensated. The calls were my secret scaffolding. I never told anyone. Not my father, Leo, who called me once in March 2020 to say Celeste had mentioned I was checking up on her, and could I please back off? She was under a lot of stress. Not my coworkers, not my friends. I told my cat, a fat orange tabby named Marmalade, who slept on my laptop while I worked, and that was it. The hardest call came in June of 2021. I'd driven down to Bakersfield for the weekend, stayed at a Motel 6 on Rosedale Highway, and stopped by the house on Saturday morning. Celeste's car wasn't in the driveway. Grandma answered the door in her house coat, hair unwashed, and when I hugged her, she felt thinner than she should have. The kitchen sink was full of dishes. The mail was piled on the dining room table, unopened. "Where's Celeste?" I asked. Grandma shrugged. "She went to see a friend, I think. Palm Springs, she'll be back Monday." Monday. It was Saturday. I stayed the whole weekend. I cleaned the kitchen, did the laundry, helped Grandma wash her hair in the bathroom sink because she couldn't manage the shower alone anymore. On Sunday afternoon, sitting on the back patio while Grandma napped, I called Celeste. She answered on the second ring. In the background, a bartender blending a frozen drink, the whine of the motor unmistakable. Then laughter, then a splash. "Hey, Aunt Celeste, just checking on Grandma's evening meds. Yeah, she's been a little foggy today, and I want to make sure the dosages are right. She's fine, Elena." I gave her everything this morning before I left. Left for where? A beat. I'm at a work thing. A conference. She wasn't employed. She hadn't had a job since 2017, when she'd been laid off from a medical billing office in Burbank. "Okay," I said. "What time will you be home tonight?" "Late. Don't wait up. I'll call you tomorrow." She didn't, and I didn't tell her I was sitting in her mother's house, looking at the pill organizer she'd allegedly filled that morning, still sealed in its Sunday compartment, untouched. I took a photo of the pill organizer with my phone, the timestamp reading 4:17 p.m., June 13th, 2021, filed it in the medical subfolder. When I finally drove back to Fresno on Monday evening, Celeste still wasn't home. I'd hired a neighbor, Mrs. Kowalski from 2 doors down, to check on Grandma twice a day. Until Celeste returned, I paid her $100 cash and gave her my number. Celeste came back Wednesday. I have a recording from that Wednesday, too. Background noise. A pool filter, the same one from February 2020. She told me Grandma's medications had been adjusted by her doctor and everything was fine. I said thank you. I said. I appreciated everything she was doing. I said it in the calmest voice I could manage because I was learning slowly, painfully through sheer repetition. They scheduled the deposition for Thursday, November 14th, 2024. I remember the date because it was exactly 10 months and 1 week after Grandma Viola died, and I had spent every single one of those months and weeks preparing for a room I didn't want to be in. The location was a conference room in a legal office building downtown Bakersfield on Truxton Avenue, neutral ground. My attorney, Marian Decker, had told me to expect a long day. Depositions are endurance tests, she said. She's going to lie. That's what people do. Your job is not to react. Your job is to sit there and let the court reporter take down every word. I wore a gray blouse and black trousers. No jewelry except Grandma's small gold cross, the one she'd worn every day since her confirmation in 1948. I'd found it in her jewelry box the week after the funeral, and I put it on and hadn't taken it off since. Celeste hadn't even noticed it was missing. That told me something. I arrived at 9:15 for a 10 o'clock deposition. Marian was already there, arranging files on the conference table. She'd brought 3 banker's boxes of documents. 3. She looked up when I walked in and gave me a small nod. There in the other conference room, Celeste, her attorney, a guy named Robert Hirsch. He's a probate litigator from LA. He's good, but he hasn't seen what we have. I sat down in the chair Marian indicated, my back to the window. The light would be in Celeste's face when she walked in. That was intentional. Marian thought of everything. At 9:58, the door opened. Celeste walked in first. She was wearing a navy blue suit that I'd never seen before, something tailored and expensive, and her hair was freshly colored, a warm auburn that made her look younger than 57. She didn't look tired. She didn't look worried. She looked like a woman who had convinced herself of her own story so completely that the truth had ceased to exist. Behind her came Robert Hirsch, a man in his early 60s with silver hair and a briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. And behind him, unexpectedly, my father, Leo Marchetti, 61 years old, retired postal worker, the man who had told me 6 months earlier, over coffee at a Denny's on Rosedale Highway, that I should let it go. Lena, she's your aunt. Family doesn't do this to family. He was there as Celeste's moral support. His own daughter was on the other side of the table, and he walked in and sat down next to his sister. I didn't look at him. I looked at the court reporter, a woman in her 40s with a stenotype machine and a calm expression, and I focused on the sound of her fingers settling on the keys. The court reporter swore Celeste in. Celeste raised her right hand and said, "I do," in a clear, steady voice. Then she sat down across from me, and for the first time that day, our eyes met. She smiled. It was a small, almost sad smile, the kind you give someone you feel sorry for. "Hi, honey," she said. I didn't answer. Marian had told me not to speak unless I was asked a direct question. Hirsch did a brief introduction for the record. Celeste Marchetti, age 57, residing at 841 Lemon Street, Bakersfield. The same house. She was still living there 10 months after the estate had frozen the assets. She'd refused to leave, and the probate court hadn't forced the issue yet because the claim was still pending. She was sleeping in Grandma's bedroom. I knew that because I'd driven past the house one night in May and seen the light on in that window, and I'd sat in my car for 20 minutes thinking about the Afghan grandma used to crochet while she watched her shows, the one with the uneven edges because her arthritis got so bad in those last years. Marian began her questions. Her voice was conversational, almost friendly. She established the basic facts first. Celeste's name, address, occupation. Celeste listed her occupation as full-time caregiver from 2018 to 2024. She said it with a straight face. And during that period, Ms. Marchetti, you lived at 841 Lemon Street with your mother, Viola Marchetti, correct? Yes, I moved in March of 2018. Mama was starting to have trouble with the stairs, and I didn't want her to be alone. And what were your typical daily duties as her caregiver? Celeste folded her hands on the table. Everything. I cooked her meals, 3 a day. I helped her bathe and dress. I managed her medications. She was on 7 different prescriptions by the end. I drove her to doctor appointments. I stayed up with her at night when she couldn't sleep. I was there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for almost 6 years. Marian nodded, as if this were all perfectly reasonable. She opened a folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. A calendar, August 2019. Ms. Marchetti, do you recall taking a trip in August of 2019? Celeste's expression flickered just for a moment. I don't remember the exact date. I may have taken a short trip at some point. A short trip? Would a 7-day carnival cruise to the Mexican Riviera qualify as a short trip? The room went quiet. The court reporter's key stopped clicking. Celeste's smile tightened. I arranged for a replacement caregiver while I was gone. Mama was never alone. A replacement caregiver. Can you give us the name of that person? I don't recall offhand. It was 5 years ago. Marian made a note. Then she pulled out another sheet. What about September of 2019, Ms. Marchetti? Do you recall spending 5 days at the Bellagio in Las Vegas? I took some personal time. Yes, caregiving is exhausting. I was entitled to breaks. And the name of the replacement caregiver for that period? I'd have to check my records. We will be happy to wait while you do that, Marian said, because we've subpoenaed phone records, credit card statements, and GPS location data from your mobile provider for the entire period of 2018 through 2024, and so far, we haven't found any calls, texts, or payments to anyone who could be described as a replacement caregiver. Perhaps you could help us understand that discrepancy. Celeste's attorney leaned forward. My client is not required to produce hypothetical records on demand. She stated she would need to check. Of course, Marian said. She pulled out another sheet and another. What about the 10 days in February 2020 when you were at a condo in Palm Springs owned by a Mr. Vincent DeMarco? Celeste's face went still. That was the boyfriend. I'd found his name on a utility bill in Grandma's kitchen drawer 2 years earlier, and I'd written it down in my notebook and never said a word to anyone. I visited a friend. Again, Mama had care. And Mr. DeMarco's condo, was that 742 East Palm Canyon Drive, Unit 3B? I don't see how that's relevant. I'm just establishing the location for the record, Marian said, because according to the security gate logs from that complex, which we obtained via subpoena last month, your vehicle entered the complex on February 3rd, 2020, and did not exit until February 13th. That's 10 days. And according to the records from 841 Lemon Street, there was no entry or exit from the house during that same period, except for a grocery delivery on February 7th. So I'm just trying to understand who was with Viola Marchetti during those 10 days. Celeste's attorney put a hand on her arm. You don't have to answer that. My client has already stated that she arranged for care. And yet she can't name a single person, Marian said. The deposition went on like that for 2 hours. Marian walked Celeste through the calendar, month by month, trip by trip, the cruise, the Vegas weekends, the Palm Springs condo, a week in Sedona, a long weekend in San Diego, a wedding in Phoenix, 417 days total, by my count, 417 days where Celeste was demonstrably not at 841 Lemon Street, not providing care, and not paying anyone else to provide care either. And then Marian opened the third banker's box. I'd like to play a recording, she said. Exhibit 23. She placed a small digital recorder on the table. The court reporter identified the exhibit for the record, and then Marian pressed play. The first thing we heard was the clink of a spoon against a coffee cup. My kitchen, March 12th, 2023, Grandma's 87th birthday party, the small one I'd hosted at my apartment because Celeste had said she was too tired to plan anything. And then Grandma's voice, thin but clear. Celeste, when are you coming home? I haven't seen you in 3 days. And Celeste's voice, annoyed. Mama, I told you I had things to do. I'll be back tonight. You said that yesterday. I'll be back tonight. Stop fussing. A pause. Then Grandma again. Elena, honey, will you write down my pills for me? Celeste said she'd leave the list, but I can't find it, and my head's all foggy. That was my voice on the recording, calm and steady. Of course, Grandma. Let's do it together right now. And then Celeste. She doesn't need a list. She just needs to pay attention. I tell her every morning. The recording played for another 4 minutes. By the end of it, the room was silent. Marian looked at Celeste. That was track 7. There are 43 more tracks, Ms. Marchetti. Would you like me to play track 8? It's from April of 2023. Your mother asks why there's no food in the refrigerator. Your response is, quote, Hirsch's face didn't change, but he closed the folder in front of him and set his pen down. That pen stayed down for the rest of the meeting. Celeste tried one more thing. She leaned forward, her voice dropping into something soft and familiar. Elena, your grandmother would be so sad to see us like this. She loved me. She wanted me taken care of. I didn't answer. Marion had told me weeks earlier, don't engage with the emotional appeals. They're not for you, they're for the mediator. Let the silence do its work. So I let it sit there, Celeste's voice hanging in the air of that sterile conference room with its fake ficus tree and its water pitcher beating condensation onto the laminate table. The mediator, a woman named Joanne Okonkwo with gray braids and a voice like a leveling tool, looked at Celeste and said, Ms.
Marchetti, from what I've reviewed, your claim has some significant evidentiary problems. I'd encourage you to speak with your attorney about a realistic resolution. Hirsch pulled Celeste into the hallway. They were gone for 22 minutes.
I know because I timed it on my phone, watching the seconds tick, while Marion answered emails on her laptop, and I drank lukewarm water and stared at a watercolor print of a harbor on the wall. Somewhere in New England, maybe. Boats I'd never sail. When they came back, Celeste's eyes were red but dry. She didn't look at me. Hirsch sat down and said, We're prepared to discuss a significantly reduced figure. We settled 3 weeks later,
December 4th, 2024. A Wednesday, the numbers came down to this. Celeste would receive $22,000 for documented out-of-pocket expenses she could actually prove. Grocery receipts, a plumber she'd paid in 2019 when the downstairs toilet flooded. 3 months of her mother's prescription copays from 2022. Receipts she'd submitted as part of her original packet, but that I'd already cross-referenced against Grandma's checking account. I didn't fight those. They were real. She'd spent the money.
The rest of the $500,000 claim evaporated. No hourly rate for caregiving, no back pay for imaginary 24-hour shifts, no compensation for sacrificing her career, which was a strange thing to claim given that Celeste hadn't held a full-time job since 2009, long before Grandma needed anyone. She signed the settlement agreement with a black ballpoint pen that Hirsch handed her. Her signature was small and tight, nothing like the looping cursive she used on birthday cards. I'd seen that signature on dozens of documents by then. The check she'd written herself from Grandma's account, the invoices she'd typed up on her laptop and printed at Kinko's. For months, I'd studied it like a specimen. Now it just looked like a woman's name on a line. $22,000. I paid it from the estate account that afternoon, wire transfer. It cleared before dinner. The house at 841 Lemon Street sold in February 2025. A young couple from Fresno bought it. She was a dental hygienist. He taught 8th grade science. They had a 2-year-old and another one on the way. I met them at the final walkthrough. The wife ran her hand along the kitchen counter where Grandma had rolled out pasta dough every Christmas Eve. And she said, This is exactly what we wanted. It feels so loved in here. I said, It was. The sale closed at $412,000. After the mortgage payoff, taxes, the realtor's commission, and the distribution to Celeste and my father, my share came to $173,400. I deposited the check at a Bank of America on Stockdale Highway on a Tuesday morning, and the teller asked if I had any special plans for it. Some of it's going into my retirement, I said, and I might take a trip. I didn't tell her the rest. That $8,000 went to pay Marion Delgado's final invoice, that I'd spent 6 months of my life cataloging evidence against a woman who used to braid my hair when I was 7, that my father still hadn't called. My father. Leo. The last time I saw him in person was at Grandma's funeral, 3 weeks before Celeste filed her claim. He'd given the eulogy. A rambling thing about how Viola had been the quiet center of the Marchetti family, how she never complained, how she made the best minestrone he'd ever tasted. He didn't mention me in the speech, not once. I sat in the second row at St. Francis, between my cousin Michael and a woman from Grandma's water aerobics class, and I listened to my father talk about our family like I wasn't in it. Afterward, at the reception in the church basement, he hugged me stiffly and said, Your grandmother was so proud of you. Past tense already, like her pride was a thing that had expired. He didn't ask about the estate, not then, but 2 days later he called and said, I think Celeste should have the house. She gave up everything for Mom. I remember where I was standing. My kitchen on Oak Street, afternoon light coming through the window over the sink, a mug of cold coffee on the counter. I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour shift. My feet hurt, my back hurt, and my father was on the phone telling me his sister deserved a house because she'd given up everything. What did she give up, I asked. A pause. Her life, her freedom. She moved in with Mom when nobody else would. Nobody else needed to, I said. Grandma didn't need a live-in caregiver in 2018. She was still driving. You don't know what it was like day to day. I was there twice a week, Dad. I know exactly what it was like. He made a sound, something between a sigh and a grunt. Anyway, think about it. She's family. I didn't argue. I'd learned by then that arguing with my father was like throwing rocks into a fog. The effort disappeared, and you were left with nothing but a sore arm. When Celeste filed the $500,000 claim in March, I called him. I said, Did you know about this? She told me she was going to ask for compensation. She's suing the estate. She's suing me. She's not suing you. She's asking for what's fair. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it. Then I put it back and said,
She's claiming she provided 24-hour care for 6 years. I have her credit card receipts.
She was in Vegas for my birthday in 2022. She was on a cruise to Cabo for New Year's 2023. She spent 412 days at her boyfriend's condo in Palm Springs. That's not 24-hour care. Silence. Then, you're keeping receipts on your own aunt? Yes. That's not how family works, Elena. I could have said a lot of things. I could have told him that family doesn't drain your grandmother's checking account to pay for margaritas at the MGM Grand. Family doesn't bill you $500,000 for work they didn't do. Family doesn't turn a eulogy into a performance and then a lawsuit. But I was tired, and I knew, I'd known for years that my father didn't want the truth. He wanted quiet. He wanted me to absorb the cost of Celeste's choices so he wouldn't have to feel uncomfortable at Thanksgiving. Okay, Dad, I said. I hear you. I hung up. He didn't call back. That was March. By December, when the settlement was signed, I'd stopped expecting his calls entirely. I read something last spring, after the mediation, but before the final papers were signed. I was sitting in my apartment, unable to sleep, scrolling through articles on my phone, the way you do when the quiet of 2 a.m. feels heavier than it should. I came across a piece about something called cognitive dissonance, Leon Festinger's theory from the 1950s, the mental discomfort of holding two contradictory beliefs at the same time. The article said that when people have invested deeply in one version of reality, they'll reject new evidence rather than revise the story they've told themselves. I stared at the screen and thought, that's my father. He'd spent decades believing Celeste was the responsible one, the caretaker, the daughter who stepped up. If he accepted my evidence, the receipts, the timestamps, the recording, he'd have to accept that he'd been wrong about her, wrong about me, wrong about the whole shape of our family. Easier to call me the villain. Easier to say that's not how family works and let the silence swallow the rest. I put the phone down. The ceiling of my apartment was water-stained in one corner, a small brown bloom I'd been meaning to tell the landlord about. My grandmother would have fixed it herself. She would have gotten a ladder and a bucket of paint and been done by lunchtime. I missed her so much, it felt like a physical weight on my chest. The steel file box is still in my closet. I thought about throwing it out after the settlement, shredding everything, erasing the last 2 years of my life, as if I could unknow what I'd learned. But I didn't. It sits on the top shelf next to a shoebox of Grandma's Christmas ornaments and a photo album my mother made before she died. Every now and then I touch the lid when I'm reaching for something else, and I feel the cold metal. And I remember. What I proved in the end was simple. Celeste was my father's love came with a condition. Agree with me. My grandmother's love came as her bent fingers on my cheek, and the same question, did you eat? Every time I stepped inside. When my aunt's lawyer saw the bank statements, the forged checks, the notarized letter Grandma signed 6 months before her mind began to fail, they dropped the suit in 3 days. No apology, of course. Just quiet. I didn't cry when the estate closed. I drove to the cemetery, sat on the grass beside her stone, and ate a tuna sandwich. She would have asked if I wanted another. Some debts don't go on a credit card, some receipts aren't on paper. You don't need to yell when you keep the record. You wait for the room where the truth fits, and you open your folder. That's my story. If this reminded you to trust your own memory or to keep the record when no one believes you, take that as your sign. If you know someone who needs to hear it, share this, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.